Viewers, in just minutes from now, US President Donald Trump is set to announce the first tranche of trade tariffs. Remember, when he did this a few months earlier, the world was watching the situation closely as many feared the possibility of a global trade war. However, while most nations chose not to respond aggressively, with China being the only exception, however, now the US President is set to release new tariff letters and the world is keeping a close watch. Remember, just hours earlier, the US President Donald Trump also shot out another warning. He said that all BRICS nations and those who support the BRICS will invite upon themselves an additional 10% tariff. But what happens to India? India has made it clear that national interest is paramount, and India will discuss the tariffs on their own terms and only accept a deal when a good deal is put forth. Here's what Union Minister Piyush Goyal said when he was questioned on India's stand on US tariffs.
I've already made the stand of India clear. India does not negotiate under deadlines. We negotiate keeping national interests in mind, and national interest is paramount in all our work across the world. We have entered into free trade agreements after the Modi government.
All right, and the big news is coming. US President Donald Trump has released a tariff letter for South Korea and also one for Japan. Now, this has mentioned 25% tariff being imposed on both nations. That's a big development coming in. Announcements as far as Japan and South Korea are concerned. 25% is the tariff that they have put out, and President Trump saying that this is because of what they believe is an unfair trade balance between the countries. And in fact, he has written letters to Lee Jae-myung, the President of the Republic of Korea, and he has also, of course, written to Ishiba Shigeru, the Prime Minister of Japan. To Korea, of course, he has said that we invite you to participate in the extraordinary economy of the United States, #1 market in the world by far. We've had years to discuss our trading relationship with Korea and have concluded we must move away from these long-term and very persistent trade deficits engendered by Korea's tariff and non-tariff policies and trade barriers. Our relationship has been unfortunately far from reciprocal, and starting on 1st August 2025, we will charge Korea a tariff of only 25% on any and all Korean products sent into the United States, separate from the sectoral tariffs. Goods transshipped to evade a higher tariff will be subject to that higher tariff. Please understand that 25% is far less than what is needed to eliminate the trade deficit disparity we have with your country. As you are aware, there will be no tariff if Korea or companies within your country decide to build or manufacture product within the United States, and in fact we'll do everything possible to get approvals quickly. So that's the information coming in at this point of time. Let's take this across to our guest joining us. With us, of course, is Dr. Jeffrey Gunter, former US ambassador. We also have Spencer Critchley, who is a political analyst and author. Dr. Santosh Mehrotra, senior economist, is with us. Rajat Sethi is author and economist. Let me come across to you first, Dr. Jeffrey Gunter. This is something that was expected. 25%, though many would say, is a fairly significant sum, and it's on two major economies, South Korea and Japan, that this has been announced. Larger questions on what will happen with other countries. India, of course, is one country which has been negotiating. What can we expect, sir?
It shouldn't be a surprise. Remember, President Trump has been saying this for 35 years. He's been talking about how America has been ripped off, how there's a tremendous trade deficit, and there's no reason why we should be supplementing the economies of all these other countries around the world. This is called America First because we negotiate from the America First position. Now, when it comes to India, I think Modi has done a phenomenal job, and he wants to make India great again. And I think when you have two great leaders and diplomats like Trump and Modi, they will reach an agreement at some part. But we're just sick of the world ripping off America. It has to stop. If you look and see, what American products are being sold in these countries and the tariffs they are putting on our products, President Trump loves the word reciprocal. When I was U.S. ambassador to Iceland, I talked about having a reciprocal relationship with them, which was very lightly pushed back. And I think President Trump wants to see reciprocal relationships for the benefit of America, to make America first, to make our American workers first. And I think this is the art of the deal on steroids, and he's going to make one.
All right, and let me bring in Spencer Critchley. Spencer, how are we going to look at this? Because, it appears that this is the same reciprocal tariff, because earlier we had seen a 24% duty on Japan. Reciprocal tariff of 25% was imposed earlier on South Korea. So are we looking at that same format now being replicated when it comes to other countries which have not been able to conclude their discussions?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to remind people that the art of the deal, which is often cited in support of Donald Trump's so-called genius at negotiating deals, was a ghost-written work of fiction. And the truth of his business career in Manhattan was of serial failure, driving one company after another into bankruptcy and managing to pay himself millions of dollars in the process. There is no master plan or master strategy here. There's a fixed idea about tariffs that Trump has had for decades now, flying in the face of all evidence. And this negotiating position he has now amounts to holding the American people hostage and threatening to do even more damage to the American economy if other countries don't bend to his will. None of this makes any sense at all. And if America has been being ripped off by these other countries all these years, somehow it's worked out pretty well, because America has had decades of incredible economic growth, is the wealthiest country and most powerful country in the history of the world. And not too long ago, The Economist magazine, one of the leading international authorities on this, described the American economy accurately as the envy of the world. So I don't know what problem President Trump thinks he's solving here, as opposed to the enormous problems he's creating, not just for other countries, but for the United States.
Right. You agree with that, Dr. Gunta? I see you smiling.
Well, I find it hysterical. I mean, we just came off of 4 years of Joe Biden, who basically put 20 million illegal aliens in our country in an attempt to steal an election.
This is changing the topic. It was Joe Biden's economy that was described as the envy of the world.
That's fine. All you have to do is look at the low unemployment that we had under Donald Trump. We had low inflation under Donald Trump. We had a strong military under Donald Trump. We had no foreign wars. Look at under Joe Biden.
Again, we're changing the topic here. We're changing the topic into an attack on Joe Biden, which is the typical. I'm afraid it's a typical response to uncomfortable facts. Joe Biden's economic performance was actually better than Donald Trump's economic performance.
The American people voted for Donald Trump, and he said exactly what he was going to do, and he's absolutely doing it. His popular rating is very high.
I don't think they voted for what's being done to them right now, which is why his popularity is plummeting.
Okay, gentlemen.
He absolutely did. He won every single swing state, every single independent.
Again, we're changing the topic here. We're changing the topic here. This is typical, unfortunately.
President Trump's carrying out what the American public wanted him to carry out.
All right, gentlemen, allow me to come in now. Let me bring in some of my
I don't think they wanted him to put them out of work and take away their health care and destroy our international trade relationships.
All right. Those, of course, are huge impacts that it's likely to have in terms of the United States. But let me take it a little more, in a broad-based manner. Let me bring in Dr. Santosh Mehrotra. Dr. Santosh Mehrotra, the very fact that Trump today indicated that anyone supporting BRICS would receive an additional 10% tariff. Now, how are we to look at that? Because, we've seen, of course, China coming out and saying that it's not, something, this is not an association which is there to, take down anybody. But the very fact that Trump is using this to sort of threaten anyone from coming forward and, even associating with BRICS, this has serious implications, because it's no longer just restricted to trade. It's also got a diplomatic aspect to it.
Yes, nominally it does. But we all know that this kind of threat is essentially aimed at China and Russia. It obviously cannot be aimed at an India with which I think we are already in an advanced stage of negotiations and possibly coming to a trade deal with the United States very shortly. And I think our Commerce Minister, our Industry Minister, Mr. Goyal, I think quite rightly and emphatically has said that we are not going to be negotiating with someone pointing the barrel of a gun to our face. So the point really is that, BRICS is one thing. We shall see how things pan out with the 10 other members of BRICS. We are in a process of negotiating a trade deal, which is apparently in an advanced stage, and we have to make sure that we are not giving up too much on agriculture, and we are making the tariff reductions that I think are going to be of interest to India, and it's in India's interest that it should actually reduce tariffs, because the India government had actually increased tariffs over the last 10 years. And we should be also concerned about ensuring the continuity of defense and critical technologies as we move forward. And we should also be concerned about the services sector and our access to our exports of services, and above all, of course, of visas, of H-1B visas, which are in the interest of the United States as much as they are in the interest of. So, what will really happen in this regard is the following, that where the interests of India first and America first come together, there will be a deal. Otherwise, there will not be a deal. It shall be put off. And,
and how easy?
One last sentence, if I might. The fact of the matter is the United States needs to begin to learn to live with the fact that the role of the dollar is systematically on the decline. Countries around the world, including Japan, not just China, are shedding the use of the dollar as foreign exchange reserves, precisely on account of the temperamental nature of US foreign policy.
Okay.
And it's highly likely that, alternative currencies will and should emerge.
Okay. Will they emerge is a very big question at this moment. Let me bring in Rajat on the points that you have made. Rajat, where there is a convergence, obviously we can expect some kind of forward movement. But the big one really for India is agriculture, dairy sector, which impacts a huge swath of the Indian population, which is still dependent on it. And at the same time, there are labor-intensive sectors such as leather, gems and jewelry, auto and steel are also certain areas where India has its concerns. The big question is, can there be that convergence? Because US seems to be quite keen that these sectors also open up.
Well, that is true, Madhav. However, I do believe that even if we are thrusted on to sign something, it would be a pale deal. We would be signing on areas where we can possibly converge, and we will have to leave out certain other critical areas, as you just mentioned, agriculture being the most important area, for a later negotiation and later deliberation. That's the only prospect that I see going forward. But I also feel that, India and US were, for a very, very long time, were considered as natural allies, with both oldest and the biggest democracies converging towards common set of moral goals to govern the world. However, the way, the weaponization of tariff that we are seeing, that even our foreign policy has to be subservient to the tariffs being set by one individual, that is not how two sovereigns negotiate. While I have been a big fan of Donald Trump's patriotic policy making, and that's how every national leader should work on, but there is a way in which you engage with sovereigns. And I don't see that this is the right way of engaging with friends who are your counterweights in the rest other parts of the country, other parts of the world. And if you want to, char all the relationships that have taken decades to converge, then so be it. Then India is also free to pursue the path that it deems fit for its own interests. The way Donald Trump is from the reciprocal standpoint, the way Donald Trump is thinking about his own country, so is Narendra Modi going to think about his own country. And therefore, I believe there would be areas like gems, agriculture, and the other big areas where India is deeply concerned about, to be left out of this current version one of the deal that we might have to sign, looking at the deadlines that Trump is putting out.
All right. And there's some breaking news coming in. In fact, I'm going to take that question across to Jeffrey in just a moment. But we are told that key U.S. indices, including the Dow Jones, are down after Trump has announced a 25% tariff on Japan and Korea. It's not just Dow Jones. We're told the NASDAQ, the S&P 500 are all down. So in the United States itself, there's a lot of negative sentiment, at least at the moment, when it comes to this particular announcement. What are the impact that it can possibly have? And Dr. Jeffrey Gunter, two key questions. One, the fact that your indices in the US itself are down. So clearly, of course, people are not very positive about countries such as Japan and Korea getting these 25% tariffs. And also, the question that Rajat is posing, it's not just India, but many countries are perhaps looking at alternative markets apart from the United States. And there's a flurry of activity where there are different trade deals being announced between various countries. Could the US potentially be pushing other countries into working closer with these kind of announcements? Two questions for you, sir.
Yeah, first and foremost, the S&P 500 is at a near all-time high. So one day's reaction of the U.S. stock market is not a reliable indicator of what's going on. It's incredibly high right now, and it's doing fantastic under President Trump. Secondly, I think President Trump would expect all his partners to do what's in their best interests. But remember, President Trump, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the administration officially, views trade with America as a privilege, not a right. And that's really the fundamental aspect of all this. And the American economy was buzzing along under President Trump. We had a different administration, and all of a sudden we had inflation, open borders, fentanyl killing everything. And I've read The Art of the Deal, and I don't know whether my esteemed colleague on the other side of this conversation has, but it's a phenomenal book. It talks quite about his relationships, and I would encourage everyone watching your program in India to read The Art of the Deal and learn about the importance of interpersonal relationships and conversations, not only with your friends, but conversations with your adversaries as well. And I think there's a great benefit there. And remember, India is a great friend. President Trump has great respect for the Indian people, has great respect for Modi, and I think we're going to see great things in a great relationship between our two fantastic, unbelievable countries. So remember, things take time. It's a negotiation.
All right, negotiations take time. Spencer Critchley, clearly Dr. Jeffrey Gunter is quite optimistic about the future when it comes to not just the trade deal, but also the India-US relationship. Your response?
Well, sure, go ahead and read The Art of the Deal. Just bear in mind, Donald Trump didn't write it, a ghostwriter did, and bear in mind that it's a work of fiction. His actual record of business success in New York supposedly was a record of failure, and that's what should be borne in mind. He has no record of success in legitimate business. He was a joke in New York finance. I've consulted. I encourage people to actually consult his record, not the work. I don't cite a work of fiction as an authoritative source. I cite the actual record of Donald Trump, which was a record of failure. And we see that with the BRICS nations talking about creating an alternative reserve currency, or even worse, resorting to using local currencies, which I think would be an international system of chaos. And a large part of the reason for that, as one of your previous speakers pointed out, is Donald Trump's incredibly volatile behavior, which led to international investors not only backing away from U.S. stocks, but backing away from U.S. Treasury bonds, which is one of the early moves that caused Donald Trump to blink, one of the many times he's blinked during this completely arbitrary trade war. And the idea that the U.S. dollar would be in doubt as a credible reserve currency is previously unthinkable. And we see the same kind of chaos that led to that development in this latest social media post claiming there will be no exceptions of these tariffs against the BRICS countries, which do include India, supposedly a strong ally of the United States. So he's lumping Russia and India and other countries like Belarus and Iran, other pariah countries along with Russia, with allies like India. This is of a piece with all of his behavior, and again is what has threatened previously unimaginably the credibility of the United States dollar. I would also like to note, I think this is part of the problem for India in forming alliances with countries like Russia and Iran and Belarus. This is often seen as realpolitik or multilateralism and behaving in one's national self-interest. But I think it's actually against one's national self-interest to do this because you find yourself in situations like this. You also undermine your own people's confidence in the mission of the nation if it's so morally fluid. And this is something we're very much wrestling with in the United States. That people are losing confidence in the moral character of the country when they are led by a president who has no moral character.
All right. One of our panelists from India, Rajat, wants to respond to you.
Trump to Joe Biden, I have no idea what the speaker just said.
No, I think there is. I will just say one thing, Dr. Gunta. I will just let Rajat come in. I'm going to come back to you because I have a question for you as well. Rajat, you want to quickly respond to that?
Yes, I just wanted to respond vis-a-vis India-Israel relationship. I mean, as a matter of fact, there are just so many dimensions to not put it so simplistically out that India is giving up on its moral character when they engage with Iran. Let me tell you, my friend, Iran is a landlocked country Afghanistan is a landlocked country. On one side, we have Pakistan. The only way for us to build relationships into Afghanistan and not let it fall prey to Pakistani agenda is to have some kind of an access through Iran into Afghanistan. The other aspect is Chabahar port. It's a very important port because Gwadar port, which sits on the Strait of Hormuz, is controlled by China. India needs to have a position where it can also co-develop along with the Iranians the Chabahar port. Otherwise, you leave the entire Arabian Sea and the entire sea lanes of communication open for Chinese to set up not just trading vessels, but also strategic vessels out there. How do you counter that? Therefore, it was Biden administration who understood that there are multiple layers on which India has to operate on to act as a counterweight for the US. Otherwise, you want to have a simplistic relationship when it comes to international relationship, then God save the world. You cannot go by such very, very first order of thinking when it comes to international relations. And I believe all previous administrations, Republican or Democrat, had that wisdom to allow India to vouch for its own domestic interests and also to some extent the interests of its natural allies like the US and the Western order. But what have we got in return? Look at that. I mean, look at the perception currently with India. Indians have lost trust on American relationship. Right now, it has plummeted to lowest level in decades. It wasn't the case. We have so many students going out and studying. I studied at Harvard. And I can tell you that there is this strong bond of connection relationship that was forged for all these decades. And all of it has extinguished in thin air right now.
All right.
And I think US has to work to reestablish these relationships. Otherwise, it's a dog-eats-dog world.
All right. Dr. Gunta, would like to comment on that?
I think there's some excellent points there that I'd love to engage with if I could.
Yeah. Okay. Conclude your point. Conclude.
I agree that it's important not to impose simplistic, absolute moral standards, and that it is a complex world, and very often it's better for us to engage with people we have even serious disagreements with than to seal ourselves off from them. So I agree with all of that. At the same time, though, I think it's very important to recognize at a certain point there are moral standards that should not be transgressed. And Russia is a pariah country internationally for a good reason. It's not just a country that has a different view of human rights than the United States does, for example, or is more authoritarian than we would like. It's a country led by a man who deliberately targets and murders civilians. He's a mass killer. His troops torture and murder civilians. He has kidnapped tens, if not hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian children, and this is on top of a long record behind this sort of behavior. The United States, for all its flaws, has generally avoided that kind of relationship, except when it has lost its way.
All I can say is that India, which also told Russia that now is not the time of war. India has ties with both Ukraine and Russia, and there are many, many things that play over here which India also has concerns, and those concerns have been partially addressed by Rajat. There are several others also which need to be listed. But my question for Dr. Gunta is this. That, the point being made by Rajat is that you simply can't throw away, at the end of the day, there is goodwill. And there's 2 decades where the trust and the friendship has been built. With these kind of announcements, I mean, you are in a situation where you're cooperating in Quad, and then you're competing when it comes to, items such as tariffs. So, there is that kind of disjunction in the tone in which President Trump, and he may be using that tone for the rest of the world as well, but it does raise some serious concerns and some very fundamental concerns.
Absolutely. And we don't have to agree with our friends 100% of the time. If you look at most relationships, even from the Ronald Reagan days, he'd have people that he agreed with 80% of the time. Donald Trump is a businessman. He's in the business of making America great again. And also, he will strengthen the relationship with Modi and the wonderful Indian people. And it's just a matter of time. And you have to understand, he's not a bureaucrat. He's not someone who spent his entire time in government. He's not a politician. He's a businessman. And this is exactly what the American people voted for. They knew exactly what they were getting because he was president before. And the whole concept that, this is terrible, this is horrible, what he's doing is just fake news.
Okay.
So I would like to welcome India to the fake news that we're hearing right now from some of the commentary. Not my esteemed Indian gentleman, but the other author on this call. It's just fake news. And the reality is we have a great relationship with India. I had a great relationship with the ambassador from India to Iceland. Donald Trump has great relationships around the world, and you're going to see great results. And I think Modi is going to make India great again, just like President Trump is making America great again. And the proof is in the polling, and he's got a track history far better than demented Joe Biden. Let's face it.
Dr. Mehrotra, let me bring in Dr. Mehrotra. Dr. Mehrotra, do you agree with Dr. Gunta when he says, and this whole business of he's a businessman, not a politician, end of the day, he's the president of the US. So, those things will have to be kept in mind. The statements, the positions that he takes publicly are going to have the repercussions globally. Dr. Mehrotra.
Inevitably, I think the premise of your question is very legitimate. I think you're asking a very legitimate question, Madhav. The fact of the matter is it doesn't matter if you have a president who's a deal maker or was a deal maker, successful or otherwise. What matters today is his role as the president of the United States, supposedly the largest economy in the world. Increasingly less and less so, but the fact is that, we have to take him on his word. And there is just no question about it. The fact of the matter is that the United States, both legitimacy as well as its stature globally, has been diminished in the last 6 months, and it is unfortunately likely to continue to be diminished. It's very unfortunate.
Go ask the Iranians if you think American
Sir, I did not interrupt you. Sir, I did not interrupt you when you were speaking.
I agree.
I would appreciate it. Thank you very much, sir, Dr. Gunta. Okay, so the bottom line, sir, is that we are friends and we should remain friends. There is no question about that. But the fact of the matter is we have good ties with China, good ties with Russia, and whatever might be their flaws as societies, we also know what the flaws of Indian society and the US society and its leaders are as well. All this has to be set aside. The real matter, the real point here is where our interests coincide, we will agree, and where our interests do not coincide, and there are a whole series of issues on which our interests do not coincide, we will continue to disagree. And that's the nature of international relations. We have to learn to live with that.
Absolutely. You want to respond to that, Dr. Gunta, very quickly? We have very limited time.
I thought it was beautifully said. I thought it was wonderfully said. I don't really have anything to add with it.
No, but the point is, look at how quickly Trump is losing allies, not just internationally, but even domestically. You have a situation where Elon Musk is saying he's going to launch a third party. And that could perhaps affect President Trump because Musk is, as everybody knows, has played a very key role in the rise of President Trump.
If you look at the premises of the American party that Elon Musk is launching, the principles are very much of the Republican Party and very much of Donald Trump. There's no one who's been stronger on the Second Amendment than Donald Trump in America. There's no one really president who's been more pro-Bitcoin than Donald Trump. There's you can just go down the list. There's no one who's been more interested in technology in the military than Donald Trump. So, you know, I think I understand what Elon Musk is trying to do. He's trying to gain political influence. He's obviously someone who you don't want to bet against either. And he has his agenda. Look at the electric vehicle, $7,500 is about to expire. Why? Because Donald Trump wants every car manufacturer to have the opportunity to compete. And he doesn't feel like electric vehicles should be subsidized by the American taxpayer. To me, that's free trade. To me, that's a businessman. And we'll see where it works out with Elon Musk.
We'll have to see how the cookie crumbles, proverbially speaking. We'll have to leave it there. Dr. Jeffrey Gunter, Spencer Critchley, as well as Dr. Santosh Mehrotra and Rajat Sethi, thanks so much for joining us this evening.